Hey everybody, I'm doing a the first coat on these tumblers right here. They have epoxy and one thing of glitter on them. So this is time for the top coat of the epoxy, and I haven't done a video like that before, I don't think. So let me go ahead and I'll get started. I've already mixed my epoxy in this cup. I use a brush to put my epoxy on the cups, and generally I start with the cup that this one already has one coat on it, so I'm going to show you what I do with that. So here's my spinner. So this is going to be the second coat for this one. So I just used the epoxy from Hobby Lobby, and I just used the 40% off coupon with that one. And the cups that have like the bottoms to them with the glitter already on them, I epoxy those last, because as you can see, I'm putting my hand here just so I'm not yanking it off the spinner. And when you're putting the epoxy on, if you have a spinner, you don't really have to put it even. So you don't have to do it this way. You don't have to do it that way the whole time. Just because epoxy is self-leveling and it will do it for you. So I make sure I go all the way down here. And then I always make sure I go this way on a cup like this, like the 30 ounces. So that way it's on that crease. And then at the top, I make sure I just go up. So I don't go this way at the top, like right at the top, because I don't want to accidentally get inside. So this is pretty good for that. And so what I do with this, with the ones at the bottom, I'm going to hold this and basically I'm just going to turn it. And this cup was a mess up, but it was a free cup for my niece, so we're going with it because I'm tired of stripping this cup. There's just sometimes when you're in a rush and you're trying to get something done, it seems like you always mess up that one that you have to get done right now. So we're not stripping this one again. So I just made a giant decal over the messed up decal on me, so ignore the weirdness to this one. I do a pretty thick coat. This should be the last coat to this one. I don't want to do another coat on it, so it's almost dripping. So if you're seeing how much I'm taking out of the thing, I'm basically like spooning it out and putting it on here. So I make sure I go on the 30 ounce that way, and at the top I make sure I go all the way to the top. And then I'm gonna do this again. Well, put the epoxy down. And I do the bottom last just so I can have something to hold basically on the cup. This cup it was spray painted pink, and then it was spray painted silver glitter. I was just trying out to see what the spray paint glitter would do. It doesn't give a full effect of glitter, obviously, but it's still cute. I do prefer just the raw loose glitter on tumblers, but I like to try things just to see what I prefer. So that's what this one is. And then at the bottom it's loose glitter. So it is at the bottom, it's just purple, and I put bling in the purple. Sorry I look a little crazy today. I've been sleeping all day. I start school next Monday, so I think my body's already preparing for me to never sleep again. So today I was just like, I'm not getting out of bed. Alright, so this looks like it's a pretty decent coat on it. If I were to rub really hard on here, see how much epoxy is on here? Like, it's dripping off. That's the way I do my cups. Okay, so there is that one. And I'll just make sure it's good at the top. I make sure when I'm looking at it like at different angles, make sure I don't see any dry spots. If I do, you just put more epoxy on it. So that's pretty good. So I'm going to give it one last push on here. Well, let me go look at this decal real quick. I'm going to put a little bit more over the decal. And so I'm literally kicking on, it's dripping off, okay? Okay, so one last push on here. And then I get the bottom. So I'm just slapping on the bottom, and then I'm going to do like on the sides a little bit here. Alright, so that's pretty good. Alright, so now I'm going to go to the glitter one. Okay, so this one has epoxy and it has loose glitter on it. And that's it so far. So one layer of epoxy, one layer of glitter. So now it is time for, well, you guys can't really see. Hang on. Okay. Now it's time for the thick coat of epoxy. So I'm just going to make sure it's on there really good. This one does have glitter at the bottom, so I'm going to glitter that last. So basically, I can either spoon it out or I just pour it out. So that's up to you. If you pour it out, make sure you just don't make a big giant mess. So this is going to get a lot of epoxy. Because sometimes if it's enough epoxy, then the next layer, it's ready for its decal. So that's my ultimate goal, is just epoxy, and then glitter, and then epoxy, then decal stage. Okay, so now I'm gonna get the lip. Okay, so that's a lot of epoxy there. So now I'm going to turn it. Now I can either turn it this way like this, or since this one's on a pool noodle, the other one was on a sponge, I turn the pool noodle. And while holding this so it doesn't come off. And like I said, this is a lot of epoxy I'm putting on there, but hopefully I don't have to come back and do another layer and then the decal. So this is the purpose of that. So I make sure I go right here in this crease up there, and it doesn't matter every which way you go, because if you are on a spinner or you hand turn, epoxy is self-leveling, so it's going to go ahead and do what it needs to do. And then I make sure I go all the way to the bottom. And I get all the way to this lip right here. Okay. And you can tell where you missed on this one. Let's see if the light shows it. Yeah. So here's the dry spot and here's the epoxy spot. So you can tell if you've missed a spot. And then I'll show you, I have spinners over here that need the heat gun, so I'll show you what I do with the heat gun. I do not let my epoxy sit. I stir it, and then I just go ahead and put it on the cups. And when you immediately stir it and put it on the cups, you will have bubbles. Most of the time when I'm using epoxy, I have bubbles on everything. So the heat gun will take the bubbles away. So I do recommend that everybody has a heat gun when dealing with epoxy. For bubbles and for little minor mess ups during the epoxy process, you can go ahead and fix it with the heat gun. Not when it's cured though, so only when it's still kind of liquefied. Okay, so there's a pretty decent coat all around this whole thing. So basically, I'm going to put more epoxy on it. So if I look underneath this cup, it's not even dripping yet, so I'm still good. And it drips, it doesn't even matter. So that's a pretty thick coat there. I make sure I go all the way to the top, all the way to the bottom. And I do see that I missed some spots right here, you know, where the little line is for the cup. So I make sure that there's in that little dip there. I'm going to give it another spin. And I just make sure that I'm not yanking my cup off the thing, so I'm still holding it. So it's still not dripping. So no, does look like I missed a spot up here. So I always go back over it because we all make mistakes and we all think we got it, but you know, there's always, sometimes you don't have it all, so it doesn't matter. Just keep going over it. Okay. So that's pretty good, and I'll show you how much epoxy is on here. So I'm gonna get this brush and look. That's how much epoxy is on here. Okay. So there's a lot. Alright, so there's enough in here for me to do the bottom. So I'm going to make sure that I fix what I just showed you guys. And then I'm going to make sure that it is on here all the way. Because the last thing I want to do is for the bottom, for it to start sliding off, because you know these tumblers like to jump off, is touch the bottom of my cup when it has epoxy on it. Alright, so I'm just putting the epoxy on the bottom, making sure there's a decent coat. I'm going to go wrap it around the bottom of the rim. I don't measure how much I put on each cup because it's all different. If I look at this really good, it looks like this glitter is kind of poking up more than this cup's glitter. So you'll have to do more layers on different types of glitter. Even though this all says fine glitter, just sometimes it's just not as fine as the next color. Alright, so that's a pretty decent coat on there. I have just a little bit more epoxy in here, so all I'm going to do is drip it on here. So there's that. And it is dripping now, so that's how I know I put a pretty decent amount on there. Okay, so now I turn the spinner on. Okay, so the heat gun, let's see if I can move you guys. Without breaking anything. It sounds like it's really terrible. Okay, well, we're just gonna hold you. Okay, so I have the heat gun. So I have a Black & Decker heat gun. And this, I already epoxied right before I did that other spinner right there. So this has been sitting here for, let's say, 10 minutes. So I have two different settings on this one. I have a high and a low on this. And I generally do the low. I'll show you what I do. I do the low when I'm on this side, and then I stand right here in the middle and do the high just so I get in the middle of those. So I'll just show you a little bit of it because you won't be able to hear me anyways when I do it. So this is what I do. It's on low. If you've ever worked with the cups and you don't have glitter on some of them, oh, on this one you can see the bubbles. Let's see, sort of. On the ones with no glitter, you can see more bubbles than the stuff that does have glitter on it, unless you have a big chunk of sitting epoxy on a tumbler, okay? So on the ones that don't have glitter, like this one and this one, you really have to make sure that there's not a chunk of just random bubbles in it. Okay, so now I'm gonna get the bottoms. Okay, so now the bottoms are done, and the bubbles that I saw on the bottom of that one, they are no longer there. So now I turn it on high, and I basically shoot it from the side, since I can't touch these cups since the bottoms are done. So I shoot it from the side. So the purpose of the heat gun is to reduce bubbles, and if you have like a dry spot, this is basically going to reheat your whole cup up so it can re-level itself. Epoxy is a self-leveling liquid, okay? So that's why you always want your spinners to be even, and that's why you turn them all the time. So that way it just keeps re-leveling and trying to be even. So that's what epoxy wants to do, is it wants to be flat. It wants to be a flat surface. So when you reheat the epoxy, when it's still kind of tacky, because I'll do this every 10-15 minutes, when it's still kind of tacky, it'll reheat itself and re-level. So then it'll be super, super smooth. So like these, this is just one coat of epoxy on there. It'll be ready for its decal on the when I take it off, when it's dry. Just because I put so much epoxy on it, I don't have to do 10 coat of epoxy. So I use the heat gun and just keep going at it. This one will need another layer of epoxy, just because that glitter was a little bit thicker. It was a little bit chunkier. So I'm going to turn it on high, and I'm going to shoot it from the inside to get on the inside of these cups. Okay, so this one has a little bump right here. So I'm basically just going to reheat that one a little bit, just so it can spread out. And then I'm going to come back to this spinner, and I'm going to epoxy these two. And then go to that spinner and epoxy those. And then I come back over here, and I reheat this. And then I heat that one. And I do it all over again. So I do this for about an hour. So I kind of babysit my cups for an hour. But then they'll be glass smooth when it's done.